The giant crystal dome of Nexus Prime sparkled under 3 different suns. Inside the dome, representatives from 47 different alien species sat in a massive circular chamber. The annual military assessment meeting was about to begin, and the air buzzed with conversations in dozens of languages. Ambassador Sarah Chun walked into the chamber wearing her best formal uniform. The dark blue fabric with gold trim looked impressive by human standards, but here among the aliens, it seemed plain and simple. She took her assigned seat in the outer ring, far from the important delegates who sat in the center. The meeting started when Chairman Vestal raised one of his 4 arms. The tall, blue-skinned Alteran was almost 3 meters high and commanded respect from every species in the room. His voice boomed through the chamber. "We gathered today to review the military strength of all member species," Chairman Vestal announced. "Ambassador Kethler of the Hegemony will present the yearly fleet reports." Kethler stood up slowly. The reptilian alien scales shifted from green to gold as he activated the holographic display in the center of the room. Numbers and ship designs floated in the air, showing the military power of each species. The Zephyrian Empire maintains 2,847 plasma-class destroyers. Kethlar began. Several bird-like Zephyrians clicked their beaks in approval. The Vorthak Collective operates 1,203 antimatter dreadnoughts. The insect-like Vorthak. Representatives buzzed with satisfaction. Chun waited patiently as each species heard their impressive numbers. Ships with quantum weapons, vessels that could travel faster than light in seconds, fleets that could destroy entire star systems. The technology gap between these species and humanity was enormous. Finally, Kethler's scales turned a darker shade as he reached Earth's data. "And finally, we have Earth's Armadas." He paused, and several aliens in the chamber began to chuckle. The humans operate 1,847 fusion drive vessels with kinetic weapons and basic energy shields. The laughter started quietly, but quickly grew louder. Chun kept her face calm, even as dozens of alien species found humanity's military efforts amusing. Kinetic weapons? Ambassador Zixara of the Zephyrians called out, her feathers ruffling with mirth. "Do they still throw rocks at their enemies?" "Perhaps they use gunpowder next," added Councillor Thekmar of the Vorthak, his mandibles clicking in what passed for laughter among his people. Kethlar raised a clawed hand to restore order, but his own amusement was clear. The human fleet does show determination. Their ships are well maintained, and their crews are disciplined at playing with toys, commented another delegate. Chairman Vestal leaned forward in his chair. "Ambassador Chun, would you like to respond to these assessments?" Chun stood up gracefully. Every alien eye in the chamber turned toward her. She was small compared to most of them, barely reaching the shoulder height of an average Alteran. But her voice was steady and clear. "Chairman Vestal, honored delegates," she began. "Humanity acknowledges that our current fleet technology is behind galactic standards. We have repeatedly requested access to improved weapon systems and faster-than-light drive technology. And those requests have been properly reviewed," Kethler interrupted smoothly. "The Council has determined that advanced military technology requires certain prerequisites. Perhaps Earth should focus on improving their industrial capacity first." More chuckling rippled through the chamber. Chun felt her jaw tighten slightly, but her expression remained professional. "We also note," continued another delegate Chun didn't recognize, "that human vessels require extensive crew complements. Most civilized species use automated systems. Humans seem to enjoy doing things the difficult way," added Ambassador Zixara. "Very rustic." Chairman Vestal consulted his datapad. "Given Earth's current capabilities, We assigned the human fleet to patrol duties in the Kepler Void region. Pirates and smugglers in that area should be manageable for kinetic weapons. The assignment was clearly meant as an insult. The Kepler Void was the most remote and unimportant region of Council space. It was where they sent species too weak to handle real military duties. "Thank you, Chairman," Chem replied without any emotion in her voice. "Humanity will serve where the Council deems appropriate." "Excellent," Vexthal said, already moving on. "Now, regarding the new hegemony trade routes through the Centaurus sector." The meeting continued for another 2 hours, but Chun barely listened. Her mind was elsewhere, thinking about conversations that had taken place in secret facilities back on Earth, projects that existed in no public records, technologies that these aliens couldn't even imagine. When the meeting finally ended, delegates filed out in small groups, many still chuckling about Earth's primitive fleet. Some made jokes about humans and their charming persistence in trying to play with the advanced species. Chun gathered her documents and prepared to leave. As she walked toward the exit, Ambassador Zixara approached her with what might have been a friendly expression. "Don't feel too disappointed, Ambassador Chun," Zephyrian said, her head tilted to one side. "Every species has their strengths. Humans are excellent at persistence, and your ships are very reliable, even if they are simple." "Thank you for your kind words," Chun replied politely. "Perhaps in a few hundred years, when Earth has developed more, you might qualify for basic plasma weapons," Zixar continued. "The Council is always willing to help lesser species improve." "I'm sure they are," Chun said. She walked away from the crystal chamber and toward her shuttle. Once inside her private quarters, Chun activated a secured communication system. The message she sent was encrypted with codes that would take alien computers centuries to break. The text was simple. "Project Prometheus, Authorization Code Alpha. Begin Phase 2 immediately. On the other side of the galaxy, in hidden facilities around Earth's moon and beyond." That message was received by people who had been waiting for this exact moment. People who had spent years developing technologies that would make today's humiliation the last one humanity would ever endure. The aliens had laughed at Earth's primitive fleets. Soon, they would learn why that was a mistake. Captain Marcus Rivara stood on the bridge of the Indomitable and watched the empty space around them. 3 months had passed since the Council meeting on Nexus Prime, and Earth's Third Fleet was now stationed in the most boring part of the galaxy. The Kepler Void lived up to its name. Empty space stretched in every direction, broken only by dead asteroids and the occasional comet. The nearest inhabited system was 6 days away by jump drive. This was where the Council sent species they didn't trust with real military duties. "Contact on long-range sensors," reported Lieutenant Kim from the communications station. She was young, maybe 25, with the kind of sharp focus that came from growing up on Luna Colony. "Multiple ships, civilian configuration." Rivera moved to the tactical display. The screen showed 17 dots moving slowly through space. "Refugee convoy from Threshold Colony," he said after checking the identification codes. Poor bastards. Everyone on the bridge knew about Threshold Colony. The hegemony had attacked it 6 weeks ago, claiming the human settlement was illegally established in their territory. 3 million people lived on that world. Now they were scattered across space in whatever ships they could find. "Sir, picking up additional contacts," Lieutenant Kim said, her voice suddenly tense. "Military signatures. Hegemony markings." Rivera's blood went cold. "How many?" "3 ships, sir. 2 destroyers and 1 heavy cruiser. They're moving to intercept the refugee convoy." The captain turned to his first officer, Commander Sarah Walsh. She was already pulling up fleet positions on her screen. Walsh had served with Rivera for 5 years, and they could practically read each other's minds in combat situations. The Defender and Resilient are on patrol in Sectors 7 and 12, Walsh reported. We can have them here in 40 minutes. The refugees don't have 40 minutes, Rivara said. He studied the tactical situation. 3 hegemony warships against a single battle cruiser. The odds were not good, but Rivera had never been one to abandon civilians. All hands battle stations, he ordered. Signal the Defender and Resilient to join us immediately. Send a message to the refugee convoy. Maintain current course. We're coming to help. The bridge transformed as crew members rushed to their combat positions. Red lights bathed everything in an urgent glow, while computers calculated firing solutions and defensive patterns. Jump drive charged, reported Chief Engineer Santos from the engine room. Ready to engage. Take us in, Rivera commanded. Space twisted around the Indomitable as her jump drive activated. The sensation always made Rivera's stomach lurch, but he kept his expression calm for the crew. A few seconds later, they dropped back into normal space right between the hegemony ships and the refugee convoy. The enemy reacted quickly. The lead hegemony destroyer immediately changed course to engage, while its companions moved to flank the human battlecruiser. Rivera had fought the hegemony before, and he knew their tactics. Fire control, target the lead destroyer, he ordered. Full spread of kinetic rounds. The Indomitable's main gun spoke with thunder that vibrated through the hull. Streams of depleted uranium projectiles lanced across space at a significant fraction of light speed. The hegemony destroyer's shields flared bright blue as the round struck. Minimal damage to target, reported Weapons Officer Chun. Their shields are holding. Rivera cursed silently. Human kinetic weapons were powerful, but hegemony energy shields could absorb tremendous punishment. Meanwhile, the enemy ships returned fire with plasma cannons that made space burn with artificial lightning. Shields down to 60%, Walsh called out as the ship shook from multiple hits. Hull breach on Deck 12. Damage control teams respond, Rivera ordered. Helm, bring us around for another pass. The battle became a deadly dance. The Indomitable used her superior maneuverability to stay ahead of the heavier hegemony ships, striking at their weak points while avoiding their most powerful weapons. Human crews were faster and more creative than most alien species, and Rivera's people made every shot count. But technology told the story. Each hit from hegemony plasma weapons tore through human shields and armor like paper. Meanwhile, their own kinetic rounds barely scratched enemy hulls protected by energy barriers that Earth science couldn't duplicate. Defender and Resilient coming out of jump. Lieutenant Kim announced. The arrival of reinforcements changed the battle immediately. Now the humans had numbers on their side, and Rivera pressed the advantage. Working together, the 3 human ships surrounded the hegemony destroyers and pounded them with coordinated fire. Target 1's shields are failing, Chun reported with excitement. Hull damage confirmed. Keep firing, Rivera ordered. Don't give them time to recover. The first hegemony destroyer exploded in a brilliant flash of light. The second one tried to retreat, but the human ships stayed on it like hunting wolves. Within minutes, it too was destroyed. That left only the heavy cruiser, and it was already turning to run. Rivera let it go. His job was to protect the refugees, not chase enemies across the galaxy. All ships, stand down from combat alert, he ordered. Damage reports. The news wasn't good. The Indomitable had suffered severe damage to her forward shields and main weapons. The Defender reported engine problems, and the Resilient had lost 2 crew members to a plasma breach. Sir, we're receiving a transmission, Lieutenant Kim said. It's from the refugee convoy. Put it through. The voice that came over the speakers was shaky with emotion. This is Captain Williams of the transport, New Hope. We can't thank you enough. You saved 3,000 lives today. Just doing our job, Captain, Rivera replied. Safe travels. After the convoy jumped away to safety, Rivera stood alone in his quarters and looked at the damage reports. They had won, but barely. 2 hegemony destroyers had nearly destroyed 3 human ships. The technology gap was crushing. His computer chimed with an incoming message. The transmission was heavily encrypted and marked with codes he hadn't seen in years. Rivera opened it and read the single line of text. Package delivery authorized. Luna Shipyard 7. Classification level black. He stared at the message for a long time before deleting it. Whatever was happening back home, it was big enough to require the highest security clearance in the human military. Meanwhile, across the galaxy, news reports about the battle in the Kepler void played on every council network. Military analysts picked apart every moment of the engagement, highlighting human weaknesses and technological limitations. Notice how the human shields failed after only a few hits, one expert explained to his audience. And their kinetic weapons required sustained fire to penetrate even basic hegemony defenses. Quite embarrassing, really, added another commentator. 3 ships needed to defeat 2 destroyers. Most civilized fleets could handle that with a single vessel. The reports were broadcast on every world in council space. Further proof that humans were second-rate soldiers with third-rate equipment. The galaxy watched and laughed, but in the hidden shipyards of Luna and Titan, construction continued on vessels that appeared in no official records. Engineers worked with technologies that defied everything the galaxy thought it knew about space warfare. Soon, the laughing would stop. Dr. Elena Vasquez pressed her face against the porthole of the deep-sea research vessel, Cousteau, and stared into the blackness below. 2 kilometers beneath the Pacific Ocean, where sunlight had never touched and pressure could crush a human body in microseconds, something impossible was living. Are you sure about these readings? She asked her research partner, Dr. James Wright, who was hunched over a bank of instruments. Triple-checked them myself, Wright replied without looking up. The organisms down there are using quantum biological processes that shouldn't exist. They're creating stable micro-singularities for energy production. Vasquez shook her head. 3 years ago, she had been studying normal deep-sea life forms. Now she was looking at creatures that seemed to bend the laws of physics. The discovery had started when military sensors detected unusual energy signatures from the deepest parts of Earth's oceans. Look at this, Wright said, pointing to a screen. These things aren't just surviving at crushing depth. They're using the pressure to compress space-time around themselves. It's like they exist partially outside normal reality. And they're completely biological? Vasquez asked, still finding it hard to believe. As far as we can tell, no metal, no artificial components. Just evolved organic tissue that somehow learned to manipulate quantum fields. The implications made Vasquez's head spin. If they could understand how these creatures worked, humanity might be able to develop technologies that would put them on equal footing with the alien species of the galaxy. A month later, Vasquez stood in a sterile laboratory beneath Luna's surface, watching as her team tried to grow samples of the deep-sea organisms in controlled conditions. The creatures were incredibly delicate outside their natural environment, dying within hours of being brought to the surface. We need to replicate their natural conditions exactly, she told her team. Pressure, temperature, even the mineral content of the water. Dr. Sarah Kim, the team's bioengineer, looked up from her microscope. I think I've found something. These organisms have specialized cells that seem to process information faster than any quantum computer we've ever built. Show me, Vasquez said. Kim adjusted her microscope's display. On the screen, Vasquez could see cellular structures that pulsed with patterns of light. The patterns were incredibly complex, far more sophisticated than anything in normal biology. Each cell contains billions of quantum processors, Kim explained. They're running calculations that would take our best computers years to complete. And they're doing it in real time. The breakthrough came 6 months later when Wright figured out how to keep the organisms alive in artificial environments. The key was creating biocompatible computer systems that could interface with the creature's quantum processing abilities. It's not just about keeping them alive. Wright explained to the assembled research team. We need to learn their language. These things communicate through quantum field fluctuations. The first successful interface nearly killed the volunteer test pilot. Commander Lisa Park was connected to a biocomputer system for 30 seconds, before collapsing with massive brain hemorrhaging. She spent 2 weeks in a coma before recovering. The information transfer rate is too high, Park reported during her debriefing. The human brain can't process data that fast without burning out. But Park also reported something else. For those 30 seconds, she had experienced a form of awareness that was completely unlike normal human consciousness. She could perceive space and time in ways that seemed impossible, as if reality had multiple layers that normal people couldn't see. We need buffer systems, Vasquez decided. Something to slow down the data transfer and translate it into formats human minds can handle. The next phase of testing took place in the outer solar system, far from any populated worlds. The first prototype ship, designated Leviathan, was built around biocomputer. Cores grown from the deep-sea organisms. The Leviathan looked unlike any ship humanity had ever built. Her hull rippled and flowed like living tissue, covered in patterns that shifted and changed as the biocomputers processed information. Weapon mounts that could reshape themselves based on tactical needs. Engines that seemed to bend space around them rather than pushing through it. Commander Park volunteered for the first test flight, despite the risks. She had spent months training with biointerface systems, learning to communicate with the quantum organisms that formed the ship's brain. The first test nearly ended in disaster. The Leviathan's biohull began to dissolve itself when the quantum systems overloaded. Park managed to shut down the main processors, just seconds before the ship would have torn itself apart. The organisms are trying to return to their natural environment, she reported over the communication system. They don't understand that we're in space instead of deep ocean. Can you teach them? Vasquez asked from the control center. I think so, Park replied. But it's going to take time. Over the following months, Park and her team learned to work with the bioships through a combination of training and adaptation. The quantum organisms slowly began to understand their new environment and purpose. In return, human crews learned to think in ways that complemented their biological partners. The real breakthrough came when Dr. Kim discovered that the organisms could modify their own structure based on external threats. When faced with simulated weapons fire, the biohull would automatically adapt to provide better protection. They're learning from every attack, Kim explained to the research team. Each time we hit them with a different weapon, they develop new defenses. What about offense? Asked Wright. Kim smiled grimly. That's even more impressive. They can produce projectiles that exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously. Normal shields can't stop something that's only partly in our reality. By the end of the year, the Leviathan had completed successful trials of all major systems. She could move through space faster than any human ship ever built. Her weapons could penetrate any known defense system, and her hull could adapt to threats in real time. More importantly, construction had begun on an entire fleet of bioships in hidden facilities throughout the solar system. Each ship was grown rather than built, taking shape over months as the quantum organisms learned their role in humanity's new military doctrine. Meanwhile, across the galaxy, Council intelligence services noted unusual energy readings from the Sol system. The signatures were unlike anything in their databases, but they appeared to be related to solar activity. Probably solar flares, reported the Hegemony intelligence analyst. Human systems are primitive enough that natural phenomena might affect their equipment. The report was filed and forgotten. After all, what could humans possibly be developing that would register on alien sensors from such a distance? As the Council debated trade agreements and border disputes, humanity prepared for a war that would redefine the balance of power in the galaxy. The deep oceans of Earth had taught them that survival belonged to the most perfectly adapted predators. Soon, the galaxy would meet Earth's newest evolution. The emergency alarm rang through the council chambers on Nexus Prime, just as Ambassador Sarah Chun was having breakfast. She dropped her coffee and rushed to the communication center, knowing that early morning alarms usually meant bad news. "What's the situation?" she asked the duty officer, a young man whose face was pale with shock. "The Gemini fleet just jumped into the New Geneva system," he reported. 12 heavy cruisers and a command ship. They're demanding that the colony surrender immediately. Chun felt her stomach drop. New Geneva was one of humanity's newest settlements, home to 3 billion people who had spent decades building a new life on that world. It was also completely defenseless. The nearest Earth fleet was 6 days away. She activated the emergency communication system and sent a priority message to the council. Within an hour, she was standing before the assembled delegates, making a desperate plea for immediate intervention. "Honored delegates," Chen began, her voice steady despite the crisis. "The Hegemony fleet is already in attack position around New Geneva. Our civilians have less than 6 hours before the bombardment begins. I formally request immediate council intervention under Article 12 of the Protection Accord." Chairman Vextel looked uncomfortable, his blue skin darkening with what might have been embarrassment. "Ambassador Chun, the Council sympathizes with your situation. However, military redeployment requires proper authorization procedures. How long do those procedures take?" Chun asked, though she already knew the answer. "Approximately 3 months," replied Kefla with barely concealed satisfaction. Perhaps the humans should have considered colony defense before establishing settlements in disputed territory. The Hegemony recognized the territory as human space for 20 years. Chun protested. "Circumstances change," Kethler said with a shrug of his scaled shoulders. Chun looked around the chamber at faces that ranged from sympathetic to openly hostile. These beings would debate for months while 3 billion humans died. She pulled out her communication device and activated a secure channel. "This is Ambassador Chun. Authorization code Alpha 7 Alpha," she said clearly. "Protocol Omega. All call signs. All theaters." The delegates looked confused by her strange words, but Chun was already walking toward the exit. She had done everything diplomacy could do. Now it was time for other methods. In the New Geneva system, panic gripped the orbital stations as Hegemony warships took up bombardment positions around the planet. Admiral Krechter of the Hegemony Navy stood on his flagship's bridge and watched human civilian ships scatter like frightened insects. "The humans are requesting negotiations," reported his communications officer. "Tell them they have 1 hour to begin evacuation of all military personnel and industrial facilities," Krechter replied. "After that, we begin target elimination." The Admiral smiled as he watched the chaos below. Humans always tried to negotiate when they should have been fighting. This would be over before the Council even finished debating intervention. "Sir," the sensor officer called out suddenly, "I'm detecting spatial anomalies on the system's edge." Krechter moved to the tactical display. "Show me." The screen showed areas of space where reality seemed to be wrong. The computer couldn't properly identify what it was seeing. Only that space-time was behaving strangely in several locations. Probably sensor malfunctions, Crester decided. Human technology is primitive enough to cause interference. Then space began to tear. The first rift opened like a wound in reality itself, edges crackling with energy that hurt to look at directly. It wasn't the blue-white portal of a standard jump drive, but something that seemed to cut through the basic structure of space-time. What in the depths? Crester breathed. From the rift emerged something that defied classification. It was clearly a ship, but unlike anything in the hegemony databases. The hull rippled and flowed like living tissue, covered in patterns that shifted and pulsed with organic light. It was massive, nearly 2 kilometers long, and shaped like some deep-sea creature from a nightmare. "Admiral, the unknown vessel is hailing us," the communications officer reported with a shaky voice. "Put it through." The message came on all frequencies, broadcast in perfect translation to every language in known space. "This is Admiral Rivara, commanding the first expeditionary fleet of the Terran Deep Navy. You have 30 seconds to withdraw from New Geneva space before we demonstrate why Earth's oceans bred the most perfect predators in known space." Crester stared at the viewscreen. The human ship hung in space like a living thing, its hull pulsing with bioluminescent patterns. But it was just one ship against his entire fleet. "Unknown vessel, you are outnumbered 12 to 1, Crester replied. "Withdraw immediately or face destruction." The response was immediate. "Your 30 seconds are up." The bioship moved like nothing Crester had ever seen. Instead of the linear acceleration of normal vessels, it flowed through space as if swimming through an ocean of stars. Its weapons fired projectiles that seemed to flicker between dimensions, sometimes visible and sometimes not. The hegemony cruiser Devastator took the first hit. The bioweapons struck its shields and simply passed through them as if they didn't exist. The projectile hit the hull, and the entire forward section of the ship ceased to exist. Not exploded, not vaporized, but edited out of reality. "All ships, open fire!" Crester shouted. Plasma cannons and particle beams lanced toward the human vessel, but the bioship's hull adapted instantly to each attack. Energy weapons were absorbed and redirected. Kinetic rounds passed harmlessly through sections of hull that briefly became non-corporeal. Meanwhile, more rifts opened across the system. The impossible ships that emerged moved with predatory grace, hunting the hegemony fleet like wolves pursuing sheep. Each bio-vessel was unique, its living hull adapted for different combat roles, but all carried the same reality-warping weapons. "Sir, the Tormentor is under attack," the sensor officer reported in growing panic. Crester watched in horror as his heavy cruiser engaged one of the smaller bioships. The hegemony vessel fired its most powerful weapons, plasma cannons that could crack a moon. The energy struck the bioship's hull and simply disappeared, absorbed into cellular structures that had evolved to process forces beyond comprehension. The bioship's return fire was almost casual. A single projectile that existed in 11 dimensions simultaneously struck the Tormentor's main reactor. The entire ship simply stopped existing, as if it had been erased from space itself. "Admiral, we're receiving surrender offers from our remaining ships," the communications officer said, his voice barely a whisper. Crester looked at the tactical display. In less than 5 minutes, the human bioships had destroyed or disabled 10 of his 12 cruisers. His own flagship was the only vessel still at full combat capacity, and it was surrounded by predators that treated the laws of physics as mere suggestions. "This is Admiral Rivara," came the voice from the lead bioship. "Admiral Crester, you have 2 choices. You can surrender your remaining vessels and personnel will be treated according to galactic conventions. Or you can continue fighting and join your ships in non-existence." Crester had served in the hegemony navy for 40 years. He had never surrendered a ship, never backed down from a fight. But he had also never faced an enemy that could unmake matter with a thought. "This is Admiral Creshter," he said slowly. I surrender." The Battle of New Geneva lasted exactly 4 minutes and 17 seconds. It would be remembered as the moment the galaxy learned that humanity was no longer the weak species they had dismissed. Emergency Council sessions convened within hours as fragmentary reports flooded in. The implications were staggering. Humans possessed technology that made every other species weapons obsolete, and somewhere in the depths of space, more bioships were awakening from their hidden construction bays, ready to patrol human space with the efficiency of apex predators. The age of human weakness was over. The age of human supremacy had begun. The Emergency Council session was unlike anything in galactic history. Delegates from 47 species sat in stunned silence as reports continued to flood in from the New Geneva system. The greatest military fleet the hegemony had ever assembled was gone, destroyed in less than 5 minutes by ships that shouldn't have been able to exist. Chairman Vexthal stood at his podium, his blue skin pale with shock. Around him, military advisors whispered urgent updates that only made the situation worse. The hegemony flagship dominance was completely destroyed, reported Admiral Lekvar of the Vorthic Navy. No debris field, no energy signature. It simply stopped being there. How is that possible? Demanded Ambassador Zixara of the Zephyrians. Her usual arrogance was replaced by barely controlled panic. Matter cannot be destroyed, only transformed. Apparently, human technology disagrees, replied Dr. Kelson, the Council's chief military scientist. The weapons they used seemed to operate outside our understanding of physics. Kethler of the hegemony sat in his chair like a broken statue. His species had just lost their most powerful fleet to an enemy they had spent years mocking. The ships moved like living creatures, he said in a hollow voice. Their hulls adapted to our weapons in real time. Adaptive armor is theoretically possible, Dr. Kelson said, consulting his datapad. But the speed of adaptation we observed would require quantum biological processing systems. No species has ever developed such technology. No species we knew about, corrected Admiral Lekvar grimly. The chamber's main screen activated, showing a communication request from Earth's diplomatic vessel. Chairman Vexthal hesitated, then accepted the call. Ambassador Chun's face appeared on the screen, but she wasn't in her usual office. Instead, she stood on what looked like the bridge of a ship, unlike anything the Council had ever seen. The background behind Chun was alive. Walls that pulsed with organic light, control surfaces that shifted and flowed like liquid mercury, patterns of bioluminescence that suggested vast intelligence at work. The technology on display made the Council's most advanced vessels look primitive. Honored delegates, Chen began, her voice carrying none of the diplomatic politeness they were used to. I address you from the bridge of the Leviathan, flagship of humanity's deep navy. Murmurs of shock rippled through the chamber. No one had known that humans possessed such vessels. For 2 years, Chung continued, you have relegated humanity to the role of galactic janitors. You have denied us the tools we needed to protect our citizens and told us our technology was adequate only for pest control in remote systems. Her eyes swept across the assembled delegates, and several of them shifted uncomfortably in their seats. You were right about one thing, Chun said. We are perfect for pest control. Behind her, the bioluminescent patterns on the ship's walls pulsed faster, as if the vessel itself was responding to her words. The hegemony raids on outer colonies have been permanently terminated, Chun announced. Their fleet has been eliminated with minimal casualties to our forces. Admiral Creshter and his surviving crew are being held in comfortable detention until they can be returned to their people. Ambassador Chun, Chairman Vexthal interrupted. his voice shaking slightly. What? What exactly are those ships? How did you develop such technology? Chun smiled, but it wasn't a pleasant expression. While you reached for the stars, Chairman, humanity learned to become the abyss. Earth's deep oceans taught us that the most perfect predators are those that adapt fastest to changing conditions. This is impossible, protested Dr. Kelson. The energy requirements alone for reality manipulation weapons would exceed the output of most stars. Would they? Chun asked. Perhaps your understanding of energy production is limited. The organisms that live in Earth's deepest trenches have been generating stable microsingularities for millions of years. We simply learned their language. The implications hit the assembled delegates like a physical blow. Humans had developed biotechnology that could manipulate fundamental forces of nature. They had ships that grew rather than being built, weapons that existed partially outside normal space-time, and the ability to adapt their defenses faster than any enemy could adapt their attacks. What do you want? Chairman Vextel asked quietly. Humanity wants what we have always wanted, Chun replied. The right to exist in peace, to protect our citizens, and to pursue our own destiny among the stars. And if we agree to these terms? Asked Ambassador Zixara nervously. Chun's expression softened slightly. Then humanity will continue to patrol the outer systems, maintaining peace and order as we have always done. Pirates, raiders, and other threats to galactic stability will find themselves facing the deep navy. And if we refuse? Kefler asked, though his voice suggested he already knew the answer. Then you will discover why apex predators don't ask permission, Chun replied, as if summoned by her words. The chamber's sensors detected massive spatial distortions throughout the system. On the main screen, 17 additional tier rifts opened around Nexus Prime. From each emerged bioships that pulsed with predatory intelligence. Their living hulls adapted for different forms of warfare. The fleet that materialized around the Council's homeworld represented power beyond anything the galaxy had ever seen. Ships that could exist in multiple dimensions, weapons that rewrote matter at the atomic level, and crews that had learned to think in harmony with quantum biological intelligences. This is the first expeditionary fleet, Chun announced. There are 12 more fleets of equal size patrolling human space, with more entering service each month. We have learned that the universe belongs to those who adapt fastest, and humanity has adapted beyond your wildest fears. The chamber fell silent. Representatives from species that had ruled the galaxy for millennia suddenly found themselves looking at a new apex predator. Humans had not conquered through aggression or expansion. They had evolved beyond the reach of conventional warfare. The Council will need time to discuss these developments, Chairman Vextel said weakly. Of course, Chun replied graciously. But I should mention that Hegemony Naval Command has already agreed to formal treaties establishing human territorial rights. Several other species have expressed interest in similar agreements. The message was clear. The galaxy's power structure had already begun to shift. Those who adapted quickly would survive and prosper. Those who didn't would face the same fate as the Hegemony's fleet. Humanity has no desire to rule other species or claim their territories, Chun continued. But neither will we tolerate aggression against human colonies or citizens. The deep places of Earth taught us that predators maintain balance, not chaos. She gestured to the bioship's living walls around her. These vessels are our gift to galactic peace. They will patrol trade routes, protect civilian shipping, and respond to distress calls without regard to species or political affiliation. The universe is large enough for all of us to thrive. The transmission ended, leaving the council chamber in stunned silence. Outside the station, the human bioships continued their patrol, living proof that the galaxy had entered a new age. Earth's armadas were no longer objects of mockery. They had become something far more dangerous, protectors with the power to reshape reality itself. The species that had laughed at human limitations now found themselves under the virus. The species that had laughed at human limitations now found themselves under themselves, under the sins. The species that had laughed at human limitations, that had laughed at human protection of predators evolved in the deepest darkness, where pressure forged perfection and survival belonged to those who embraced the impossible. Humanity had risen from the abyss to claim their place among the stars, and the galaxy would never be the same.